Hello there. Let's have a little chat about targeted announcements because there's a couple of different ways that you can target an announcement as a politician or a public figure to make sure that the right people are getting what they need out of your announcement. If you're using something like social media as a tool, for example, you can really specifically target how your advertising goes out. It can be based on things like location or gender, whether or not you've got kids, what kind of phone you use. There's a whole bunch of really specific targeting tools out there. When it comes to other kind of announcements, though, you have to be a little bit more careful with how you target an announcement to go out. So, for an example, this is Samantha Cristoforetti. She is an Italian astronaut currently aboard the International Space Station. Here, she's dressed up as Captain Catherine Janeway from Star Trek Voyager, which for me is like nerd candy. It's so cool. There's an actual astronaut in space dressed up as a really cool sci-fi figure. And that's really specifically who this audience is for, but that doesn't mean other people can't appreciate or understand how much effort went into this, how cool space stuff is, all of that kind of thing. Yesterday, though, we saw an announcement from National, which was a policy about getting rid of phones and banning them in schools for primary, intermediate, and secondary school students during school hours. And it was really fascinating to see the response because educators came out and said, look, we've already got policies in place that work for us. A lot of parents came out and said, we need to have that ability to be able to communicate with our kids if something crops up or if there's an emergency or, God forbid, something awful happens. And National turned around and said, well, we talked to a few educators, but we didn't talk to the Education Board. This policy is not for any of them. It's not for parents. It's certainly not for young voters, and it's definitely not for educators. This is a policy designed for the angry get off my lawn crowd. This guy. Well, maybe not this guy specifically because it's Clint Eastwood and he can't vote here. And he is a little weird. There was that time that he did that whole talk to himself at the Republican National Congress. That was very weird. But that's who this is targeted at, those people who feel that kids these days have it too easy. It's a policy that's very similar to getting rid of laptops and tablets earlier this century, or desktop computers in classrooms, or calculators in the 70s and 80s, or slate and paper in the early 20th century. It's very reactionary, but it's very much designed for that older voter that's National's bread and butter. So a lot of people will sit there and criticize and laugh, but there will be people out there as well who see this as a really important element to make sure kids these days are doing as they should. And it's really important that as voters, we know who these policies are targeted at because it's really easy to dismiss a policy that doesn't necessarily affect us directly, but it can affect other voters. Have a look and see what policies are out there from across the political spectrum because there are bound to be examples everywhere that are targeted really specifically at certain groups of people, and see whether or not you can see how it is that they've gone out to make that targeting happen.